Hi, friends. Welcome back to The Genesis. My guest this week is Dana Lynn Lewis, a Portland artist whose work is fabulous but does not stay politely inside the gallery by any means. Dana is the founder of Gather, Make, Shelter, a long-running collaborative project that brings professional artists together with people experiencing houselessness and poverty, making work side by side, sharing meals, paying participants for their time, and then bringing those stories and objects into public view in a way that refuses the kind of usual us and them bifurcation that so many cities dealing with homelessness confront. She really breaks that down with her incredibly beautiful work and her beautiful approach. In this conversation, we go back to the moment that this work really ignited. Dana's time in Senegal during the 2016 election. She discusses the kind of strange clarity that came from being far away and looking in on the United States, people around her with every reason to be cynical, insisting that something important was happening and something good would come out of this. And she embraced that idea. She talks about her return to Portland and a very important human moment under the steel bridge that became the seed of an idea that quickly became Gather, Make, Shelter through the beautiful work that she does. We also talk about what Dana calls connection, where that impulse comes from in her life. We talk about her background and her Jewish upbringing and the role that Jewish summer camp played in her work. And we also talk about the idea that there's Dana the artist and Dana the activist. For her, it's all emergent out of this sense of connection. Finally, we do talk about her beautiful, beautiful multimedia artistic work. And there are links for you to encounter her work up online, including links to Gather, Make, Shelter. This is a two-parter because we had so much to talk about. The second part of the conversation will be out next week. Enjoy my conversation with the one and only Dana Lynn Lewis. Dana Lynn Lewis, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
I am really excited to explore with you. Why don't you start, if you would, by just telling us a little bit about what Gather, Make, Shelter is. There are probably some people listening who think of you first as an artist and don't necessarily know about this work.
Thank you. And this is actually part of my artistic practice, Gather, Make, Shelter. So it's all kind of one and the same. But like you said, a lot of people don't know. They associate me with the gallery shows or the museum shows, public art, and I have two different websites around that. Gather, Make, Shelter was started in 2017 as a result of me working in Senegal at the Joseph and Annie Albers Foundation at a residency called Thread. And I was there when Trump was elected and I didn't want to come home. And I was working on my own work and I was also collaborating deeply with people in the village, primarily women. And I was having this fantastic time and I just didn't want to come home. Now, granted, I had 7 full weeks there, so I could stay away from it for a while. But the people and my friends there said something good will come of this. And it's great that you're here doing this work, but you have work to do there as well. And I'm listening to these people in rural Senegal they have survived so many things historically, contemporarily, cultural devastation, death, famine, all kinds of things. And they're saying to me, something good will come of this. So
you're talking 2016?
And then he said, something good will come of this. And I was just shocked and freaked out. And I had all this gauze that I had brought. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it, but I thought I was going to maybe start building like sculpture with it. I took all this gauze and I dyed it black and it dried instantly. And then I wrapped myself in this black gauze and I just sat in my room. It just was instinctual. I wasn't even thinking about art or anything. I was just like, I just needed to be in this black shroud. And then this artist, Omar Ball from Mauritania, came in and he would come in the morning and we'd have coffee together. And he goes, I'm here for Oh, what happened? And I said, Trump. He goes, no. And I said, yeah. And he sat down next to me and we were silent for at least 5 minutes. And then he poured the coffee and he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, I'm changing your name. And I said, what? And he said, Canadian Madam Namaste. And you get that black thing off of you and you get back to work because we're here to be together and do amazing things. and you can't let this stop you.
Wow. It's not like they have reason to have wonderful affection for the United States, Democrats or Republicans.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that they understood that even given that context, like this is really not good.
Yeah. So then I had my amazing time there. A part of what I did towards the end was I worked with these ceramic artists, this women's collective, and I taught painting and drawing and entrepreneurial skill building relative to ceramics. And which I have a ceramic background and a sculpture background, different materials. But this was something that I thought if they were interested, this is how I work with cultures that aren't my own, is that I just kind of like hang out a lot and I listen and I observe things and then I bring stuff with me. And if people are interested, maybe we come together to do something. And they were very interested in learning about painting and drawing. And so we had this thing. It actually created a new income stream for them and it was really powerful. And then I came back again after he had been elected. And that was very interesting because we had a whole nother discussion around that. But
so I want to zoom in on the entrepreneurial part, but was that just a random idea you had? Like I could help these people make money, or was that built into the program you were doing? Where did that come from?
I had observed seeing somebody else work with them in ceramics that they were making things that weren't functional. And I thought, I bet they're not really interested in that. I'm not really sure, so I wonder like what I could do that could be useful. Cause I know there's a water pot, there's a incense pot, and then there's like a pea pot that the kids might go to the bathroom in the middle of the night so they don't have to leave their home. When I got there, I said, if you're interested, I could teach you some drawing techniques. And I brought some materials that you could work on your ceramics this way. And I just went through some drawing exercises with them and I brought it back to the clothing that they were wearing. So it was very relevant to what they were looking at and they just took off on it. There are some of pictures of that on my website in the residency area. But anyway, so when I left there, I came back and I was really just, I'm just going to lose it. And I thought, okay, it's cool to go to other countries and do something, but I know there's something that I can do here. I've been in Portland now for about 35 years. So I've seen a lot of the impact of the growth and the change and people, more houseless people being unhoused because of the changes in Portland and the growth and just watched a lot of this happen. I just came sight unseen after grad school. I got this job to be a resident at the Oregon College of Art and Craft. And then part of the reason I stay and continue to stay is that in that time, a lot of things and people that were really interesting to me were really collaborative and interested in each other artistically and just conceptually. And people were like coming together and doing things together in extraordinary ways. And I thought, ooh, I love this. Like you could call up a politician and you could get a meeting and you could have these discussions and there was just ways of coming together that I still hold on to and I still seek and find people that are like that. And so,
those were like the waning years in my mind of like when Portland was still like it had remnants of being a small town, even in the late 80s.
Yep.
But those kind of personal relationships were such a part of how the city worked, I suppose, for better and worse. But it certainly it had nice aspects to it.
The art scene's grown a lot. I think people who want to be seen and heard in ways that they haven't been able to in their own communities. Lots of queer and trans folks to be seen and as community members and as humans in ways that they haven't been able to in other communities. And it's just an example.
And you come to Portland and it's a place that's changing rapidly and there's increased homelessness after you're here for a couple of years. And how does that play into what you do next?
Yeah, I came back from Senegal and I was like, okay, I know there's something I can do. And I was riding my bike down the esplanade between my studio and my house. And I saw these people who live under the steel bridge and have been living there for a long time. I observed this guy before who had been fixing bicycles and I blew a tire like right there. So I said, wow, I wonder if I could get that guy to fix my tire. So I pulled in and I said, knock, knock, because there's no doors, but that's, knock, knock. And somebody came to the door and they said, what do you want? And I was like, oh my God, like the stick 'em up hands. And I said, nothing. I just blew a tire and there's a guy in here that fixes bikes. And I was wondering if maybe I could get him. What are you talking? A bike mechanic. And he said, whose is it? And I said, he fixes bikes, tall black guy with dreadlocks. And they're like, oh, he's not here right now, but hey, it's starting to rain. Do you want a cup of tea? What's your name?
Wow.
We had this kind of conversation, and I left without my bike being fixed, and I had money in my pocket, and I had my raincoat on, and I'm not that far from my studio, and I'm rolling down the Esplanade, and I'm thinking more people just need to have these experiences with realize our shared humanity, and really, really, like, it comes down to that. We're all human. And I thought about a 1-year art project. And I decided after 7 months of running around on my bicycle and talking to people, housed and unhoused, philanthropists, business owners, also people working in agencies with the houseless, because I didn't want to take away from what people were doing. I spent 7 months doing that research. And then I started to roll with it. And I thought, okay, I think I know what to do. I asked all these ceramic artists who I have a ceramic background in Portland relationships with if they'd be interested in throwing and making pots. And people, because I want to do something, I don't know what to do. So a lot of artists really love the conduit. And that's a beautiful thing about GMS is that we have a lot of professional artists coming to us with collaborative ideas and we get work with. So that I started Gather, Make, Shelter in 2017 on my bike, running around, trying to figure this out. And what I thought I would do is teach a few workshops over the course of 8 months maybe I teach 10 workshops over the course of 8 months. And I would engage about, 50 people who are experiencing houselessness and poverty. And I would pay them to participate, give them t-shirts. And we always had meals together every single time. And that maybe we'd have a potluck in the park as the final celebration. Well, right. Once it started like wildfire. And I taught 60 workshops to 600 folks experiencing houselessness and poverty in 22 agencies in 8 months. And all that happened. They all got paid. We had meals together. They got t-shirts. They donated their finished bowls back to the project. And then we had a huge festival at Pioneer Courthouse Square where 1,000 people were in attendance. And so 2016 is, so he is elected in 16. Yes. And then he went into office in 17.
January of 17. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's 17 was when we officially marked that as the beginning of Gather, Make, Shelter.
Wow.
Yeah. So we're in March, sort of I think in March is when we got the first donations and stuff. So we are about to turn 9 at this point.
I bet that's hard to believe.
It's crazy. So what happened was Pioneer Courthouse Square, there's 1,000 people. We had free food for everybody. We had music. Edna Vasquez played, and we had the Karen Lovely band, and we had Joaquin Lopez. We had all these different people who were playing and free food. And then we had this big tent that was full of 600 bowls that all these artists made. When we did workshops with them, they could talk about whatever they wanted to share. They might say, "Hi, my name's Rosie, and I've been homeless in Portland for 5 years."
But it allows people who are not homeless to encounter the humanity of the people who are homeless at this event,
and to see people as community members and neighbors.
Yes.
Instead of you're the person without the roof and I'm the person with the roof or whatever.
You're not in a different
it blurred things. And what was one of my favorite parts of the project is once a month people would come by and have something to drink and a little bit of something to, a little nosh. And they never once said, "Hey, are you houseless or not?"
How did you being an artist shape Gather, Make, Shelter?
I showed at Russo Lee for 30 some years. I've been in the Portland Art Museum. I've done lots of public art around town and in the Pacific Northwest. I've shown in other countries. I have an arts background, right? I'm a professional artist who does stuff. But an extremely important part of my practice is this creative, collaborative, social justice work. And I consider that my practice as well. And so I feel like when you're a plastic making things visual artist, Like we make things that we haven't seen before. In general, that's how I feel. And some people make things they have seen before. But for me, I feel like I make things I haven't seen before. And I feel like it just extends into my belief system that I see a different landscape for how we can be together in the world. And I want to figure out how to make that.
Would you say that anybody who's trying to bring some new reality into the world, whether it's politically or culturally, would you consider that a form of art?
I think that one of the best things that we can do in this world as far as help, especially with how messed up so many things are right now, that we could help people find their creativity in so many ways. Like we could have a more creative political climate. We could have also, I feel like it's creative collaboration, because you don't have to be an artist at that table. But if you bring artists who have a certain kind of creativity to the table, and then there's lawyers who have a different kind of creativity at the table, it doesn't necessarily mean they identify as artists. There's lots of ways to be creative in all of the things that we do. People were able to ignite their creativity more and be more, we would have less on in this world. And I think that that's actually which is gonna save us or move us into a future that we want to be part of.
One of the questions that I've returned to on this podcast is whether art and culture have a political direction or political purpose, or whether art is just allowed to be something that's disengaged from the world. But for you, that it's almost like that question doesn't make sense, because your creative vision is not limited to the media you work with in a gallery, but it's you're wanting to bring that same creativity to anything that happens in the world.
Yes. For example, I don't call myself a ceramic artist or a glass artist or a sculptor or a painter or drawer. I do all those things, but I don't want to be defined or hemmed in by identifying as one of those things. I just feel like it's about creativity. That being said, I also think there was somebody, I remember I was talking with Anne Sachs once, who's one of my mentors and deep long-term friend. And she said, this is really cool that you're doing all these creative things, but is the art good? And I said, the proof will be in the pudding when you see it. And then all this amazing stuff's coming out. And then the project went from being funded by individuals like the Sachs and like the Uncless and several other people in town to being funded by foundations, Oregon Jewish Community Foundation, the same, and also being funded by the Andy Warhol Foundation. The other thing about Gather Make Shelter is that in the beginning, I started it with something I knew well and knew that I could do and knew that I could help other people be successful with, which is painting on ceramics and drawing. But every other kind of medium that we get into has to do with people that I meet, artists who were in the project and thinkers and creatives who come to it saying, the reason we had a fashion show 3 years ago and was because I met this woman in the Queer Affinity Village that we helped start the first 3 villages in town, which was called C3PO, Creating Conscious Community with People Outside. That was during the pandemic. One of them was called Queer Affinity. And there was a lovely woman who was living in that village named Starburst. And she said, oh, I know that you just got this gallery space and I'm not an artist, but can I do something? And I'm like, Starburst. Starburst is this amazing trans woman who lights up the room every day. And I said, Starburst, you are walking art. And she said, this is art? And I said, yeah, I think this is art. And I said, if you could do anything, what would you do? And she said, if we had a fashion show. And I said, that's cool. What does that look like? And she said, we could have it in between. This was on Water Avenue when the BIPOC and the Queer Affinity Village were there. Between the 2 villages, and we could sell tickets for $3. And then at the end, we could buy cigarettes for everybody. And I said, okay, that's an idea. And then we turned into this thing that was like Project Runway. And we had our first show at the Pride Festival that had just opened up after the pandemic. Deborah Porta, who runs the Pride Northwest, called and said, hey, what do you got? And I said, we have a fashion show. And she's, but now...
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
But now, fast forward 3 years, we've had painting and drawing and bookmaking, and they're out speaking, and we're on the road showing their work to people, and there's sculpture, and there's one person shows, and there's multimedia, there's music involved. This last year, several people who'd been in the project for many years, some of them 8 years, said, "Hey, can we do another fashion show?" I'm like, "Sure."
Where can people see this online? Is there stuff where people can see this thing?
Yeah. So gathermakeshelter.org. And
it strikes me that like one of the things that I want to just explore a little bit is connectivity, is connection. And I think I saw this in something you had written, but like it manifests in your own work, at least to my eye, in way the fact that you thought to stop and talk to the guy at the steel bridge, and then you didn't just run away when he like came up to you and was like, "Wait, who's there?" But you engaged. Your connection is central to what your vision of the world. Yeah. Where do you think that comes from?
I didn't really grow up in a community that understood me. And so I was seeking connection from a pretty early age. I knew I needed to find my people. And I feel like universe took care of me and listened to me and helped me find my community. And I built those connections, or I was yearning to build connections since I was very young. Some of the very, very like an early kind of, I had a teacher in high school that I kind of credit with pretty much saving my life, and grew up in urban Milwaukee in a pretty rough high school with a lot of challenges. And the press was trying really hard to make a big deal out of saying that we had riots and things it was during a time of desegregation, and a lot of students felt like they were being forced to integrate and forced to connect with each other. And it was done, and it felt very violent. And
what year are this? Your high school?
So this was like 76 to 81. Because also my high school was a senior high school, which is crazy, like 3,500 kids. So there was a human relations liaison, and they created some positions. They got one guy, gave him a job to be the human relations coordinator for the whole school. And they could come up with different things. So Bruce came up with this idea that he wanted to create a peer facilitation counseling center and teach us. And he took us all he picked 12 kids out of 3,600 to do this. And he taught us himself, but also at Marquette University. And we had all these different kind of teachings that he taught us how to be peer facilitators and how to de-escalate and how to bring community together. And we actually got the cops to take their guns out of our schools, and because they would be carrying guns and walkie-talkies and escalating things that weren't true.
So this Bruce fellow was a teacher who had a huge impact on you.
Huge.
Sounds like.
Yeah, huge. Yeah.
Isn't that amazing? I was speaking with somebody earlier today about, in her case, it was a rabbi who had an enormous effect. And when we look back on our own lives, and we see these individuals whose work whose work shapes us, it's really it gives one hope, because you realize a single interaction can change somebody's life.
I grew up in a neighborhood that like most of the Jewish people had fled. White flight out of the center core. But my Jewish experience from that point was also where I found community and connectivity in like BBYO. And even though there weren't many in my high school, through the grapevine, I found some things there. Then I started working as a CIT in a Jewish summer camp. And then
really?
And then I was like, I was at summer camps for, I think, 8 years, because I was trying to figure out how to get in some way, shape, or form. And I was at my dad had a gas station, and one year there was an oil embargo, and he made a bunch of money that year. And he said, does somebody want to go to summer camp? And nobody in my family did. And I was like, I want to go. So I had one time as a as a camper, and that really also changed my life, was amazing.
Yeah.
And I was like, I want life to be more like summer camp. And,
Yeah.
you know,
Because you just love you had been seeking connection and your
yes,
people, and
yes,
that environment is
yes,
so incredible. You
yes,
feel uplifted, and
yes,
every moment you're connected to
yes,
people and you have something in common.
yes.
So the Jewishness, or was Judaism important either culturally or religiously, or was it just more of the social connection?
That was interesting. It was, I mean, it's sort of like, it's kind of like a simmering soup that I'm finding the pieces of, oh, I get that. So it's not necessarily things that I knew directly, the connectivity, but these things that I see throughout my life that I'm like, yes, like for example, like I had a bat mitzvah, I went to Hebrew school and Sunday school and all that. But at some point I was just like, I'm not really sure I'm digesting this and own. But then meeting Jews in different places in different ways, I never really had to seek out Jewish connection because there were Jewish people around. But when I moved up to the
Yes.
Northwest, I was like, well, first of all, it's like the whitest place I've ever lived. And then second of
Right.
all, it was like, it wasn't any like natural connection to a Jewish community. And I wasn't going to go to a temple to seek it out because
That's just not your
not
jam.
like, it just didn't make sense to me. And so I did have some connections in the community, but it's also like I'm seeing like the lessons and the connectivity come to me in different kind of aha moments at different places. For example, like starting Gather Make Shelter and participating in building villages and bringing communities together. Then pretty recently, like five or 8 years ago, I dug into the history that I wasn't sure, but I had a feeling about, and found out that my great grandfather was in Kiev and built shtetls and was the kind of mayor of his shtetl. And
Wow.
as the insurgents are coming in and things were getting cranky and all that was happening, there was a knock on his door one night and he was shot in the head. And my grandfather and great grandmother and my aunt were hiding in a hiding place in the basement. And he's smart, so he built that hiding place. And then my grandfather, they escaped in the night and they made their way here, and that's why I'm here.
What do you know what year that was?
I'm not certain the year. It's just prior to Nazi invasion. So
Wow, gosh.
So it's interesting because there's a yearning in my heart for, I don't feel connected to most of my family. I don't know where I came from. I built this life, this kind of stuff on my own. And then when that hit me, that knowledge hit me through my cousins and my seeking to find out some history, I was like, oh my gosh, like my great grandfather built villages. Then I thought, I guess I have somebody back there.
Wow, that's really powerful. That's beautiful. It's funny because somebody could be listening to this whole thing and say, "Oh, this woman is an awesome activist, and God, what cool stuff she does, and her artwork, her creativity manifests in like making a difference in the world." But your visual work is gorgeous, and I don't want people to miss that. Like, so tell me about, I don't know. Tell me about like what are you working on? What are you working on right now? And how do you balance, my gosh, doing the work you do through GSM? Like that's already a full-time job. How do you actually carve out time to do your own work in terms of art? Okay, I'm going to pull up the website right now.
Okay.
By the way, Mazel Tov on being the first person on this podcast who's having a screen share.
Oh,
very exciting. Okay, I'm not quite sure what people are going to be able to see, but let's see.
Okay, that's the image I wanted to share with you. So that's 7 feet in diameter. It's made out of teeny tiny glass beads. And I've talked about myself and when I give talks and stuff, I feel like I'm a spider and I'm making connections and I'm constantly seeking connections. And you picked up on that. And
wow.
And then at some point with my last exhibition at Rousseau Lee in 2024, this was a big piece in that show, which is a 7-foot diameter spider web made out of teeny tiny glass beads, which is
I assumed this was made out of wire, but this is made out of like thousands of tiny glass beads.
Yes. And you can see, if you click on it, you can see a detail of what that looks like, I think. Okay. If you look at 2020, look at 2024, click on that.
Okay.
So Alchemy of Tears was the name of the exhibition, but also and then there's a poem that I wrote. And then under that, I think there's a detail. Yeah, there you go.
Oh, there's the detail. So now there are some people who are just listening to this, but if people want to go to the YouTube channel, and I'll put in the show notes, I'll show how to do that. You can see these beautiful pictures. Wow, look at that. Yeah, do you know how many beads you used for that?
Hundreds of thousands of beads on that thing. There's these meditative practices, and the beads are kind of like they're fragile in that they're glass, and they're not fragile because they're so tiny. There's a fragility to them. There's a transparency to them. And also they're like tears and cells, and kind of like one by one, we put this together, and it's very delicate, this life that we weave. I also really, when I gave a talk at City Hall for something, I said something about, I consider myself a spider, and I've been like shooting out like Spider Woman. Here's my, like my things since I was a little girl. But I have to say that it's not just like I built this all by myself, nor do I say Gather Make Shelter was built all by myself. But your web is only as strong as your connection points. And there's thousands of connection points that built that web. I just manifested the visualization of that in that piece.
So it's that piece is an autobiographical piece in a sense, but it's also not about you. It's about your vision of connectedness. Yeah. Gosh, I wonder, you're so invested in terms of energy and time and just passion in the work of Gather Make Shelter. But then you also have this work as a very successful artist in your own right, who's like showing in galleries.
Mm-hmm. I think I understand why it's confused, that question, because you're not the only person who asks about it. But to me, it's just very connected. The whole thing feels it's just like what I do. But I can't be really pinned down, which is also, I just want to do what I do. But so when I'm in a gallery situation, a relationship with a gallery, I've been lucky and fortunate to have gallerists that don't expect me to paint the same show, make the same thing every single time I do it. And they're willing there to go there with me. And right now, actually, where the other pieces of my studio practice are taking me is I'm collaborating with 2 professors at Reed, one who's the head of the dance department there, Carla Mann, and the other who's a musician in the music department. And we are massaging collaborations that are going to manifest in public something several different times over the next 2 years. So it's
sorry, as we're speaking, I'm showing pictures from. Was this from an exhibit?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this whole book is an exhibit.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah. And also, like, I'm a finalist for a public art project right now, which is going to be something different if I get it. And then there's also, I'm working on some collaborations with people in other disciplines right now in Portland, which is another thing that I do. So it's kind of like, I don't really see it being that unusual, but I also know that it's for some people, many artists will have one thing that they do and they do it.
I understand. Yeah. So, and by the way, for people who are listening right now, as Dana is speaking, I'm scrolling through this gorgeous catalog of her beautiful work.
Thank you.
So for you, Dana, everything's connected for you, and your work as an artist and it's connective aesthetic is part of the whole person you are, which also includes GMS. But for the people coming into the gallery, like for the gallery crowd, they just see this disconnected one part of you. And I'm just wondering if that's weird for you, that they might not know that you have this larger artistic vision, and they're just seeing, oh, there's a cool piece, maybe I can buy it.
I think that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me too, I think like pandemic's a good example of something that happened that or political times being what they are and so difficult. More and more, I do know a lot of artists that are like, it's not enough to sit in the studio and make that object that only 2 people can afford, put in their house that maybe 10 people will see a year at a dinner party. And maybe that will get me a new truck, or I'll be able to renovate something in my studio because of it. But it's not like I can live my whole life on it. And it's an experience. And I'm not belittling the collector, because I'm very appreciative and proud to be in people's homes and in museums, things where people collect artwork. I want people to own the artwork. I don't want to own all my artwork. And it's one way in which I can contribute to the lives of individuals.
Okay, that's the end of the first part of my conversation with Dana Lynn Lewis. Tune in next week for the second part of our fascinating conversation. Thanks so much for listening.